family history. The doctor comes in, introduces himself, asks questions about my health, good. Recent illnesses, none. Operations, tonsils removed when I was 4. Maternal grandparents, grandmother died at 92 from old age. Grandfather died at 66 from a heart attack. Paternal grandparents died before I was born. The doctor says it is important for my medical history to know how they died. So I tell him they died in Auschwitz. He has no more questions and tells me to undress for the physical exam. Learning a new language. This is for you, Dr. Stieg. My father is teaching me German. He still speaks fluently, even though he escaped from Nazi Germany almost 70 years ago when he was 17. We study nouns and verbs. We study when to use the formal pronoun sie, you, and when to use the more familiar du. One must be offered permission to use the familiar. We study dialects, the word ich, I. The Berliners pronounce it ich, those from Frankfurt am Main, ich, those from Schwaben, ich or I. He tells me when he was a kid, he and his friends used to say in a Berliner dialect, Berlin gewesen or Anje gegessen and sie war so süß gewesen. I was in Berlin and I ate an orange and it was very sweet. And then we added, dass mir die Brühe die Gosch runtergelaufen ist, with the juices running down my mouth. He explains, it is in our Schwäbisch dialect. I should say, it was our dialect. Dogs. I came across something, my father tells me, as I'm driving him to cardiac rehab. In my mind, as if his mind were a filing cabinet or the dish where coins and keys are kept. It was something an old man told him when he was a boy, how the stones freeze in winter, but the dogs who chase you don't. And 2 days later, we're sitting on the back porch on Rosh Hashanah afternoon, and he tells me that the way of life he grew up with in southern Germany no longer exists, and if he thinks about it too much, it will make him crazy and is not worth the consequences. And I want to tell him that I can hear the chazan singing in shul, and I can smell the raisin challahs his mother baked for a sweet new year. But it will not stop the dogs, so we just sit there and watch the birds that have gathered at the feeder. And these last 2 poems are about the garden. My father loves his garden, and it's this great way to imagine the cycles of life. And in this poem, I reference my father's mother and Joseph, who was his little brother. Thinning out the carrots. It's July in New England, and my father and I are working in the garden, thinning out the carrots. We got visas for my mother and Joseph to get out of Germany in 1941 and go to Cuba. Instead, they went to Holland to be with my father and sister who'd gone there in 1940 and waited for their visas to America. My mother said the family should stay together. He put his head down and continues thinning out the carrots. And this last poem is a poem about hope, because through all of this, my parents still have hope and faith that the future can be better and that the world can be better. And in the middle of this poem, there is a bracha that's weaved into the poem. Planting, bringing the dirt to his face, my father smells it. This is good soil. Blessed are you. And we plant the garden. And my father tells me he dreamed while in the hospital of his garden, dreamed of it all winter, and he made a vow he'd plant again this year, King of the universe. And he tells me when planting seeds, stay in the middle of the row. Don't go too far to the left or too far to the right. And each morning he goes to his garden, who gives us life, tends his plants the way he tends his children, whispers, grow, urges them to wrap their tendrils around the fence, hang on, and we water the plants, listen to water as it drips, falls from leaf to the soil, and my father tells me some days he can almost see the vegetables growing in the sunlight, and I tell him sometimes I can too, sustains us and brings us to this time. And before eating the vegetables, we make the blessing for tasting food for the first time in its season.